The moment she crossed my threshold, I knew this would spiral out of control. HOA Karen didn't knock. She didn't wait. She barged in like she owned the place. I had just stepped out of the shower, towel barely around my waist, and there she was, clipboard in hand. Sunglasses perched on her head, an expression that screamed entitlement. Neighbors had warned me about her, how she believed every property in the community was hers to monitor. But this was a new level. Her voice was sharp, accusatory, practically echoing through the living room. "I need to inspect your house. It's a violation of HOA rules," she barked, pointing at nothing in particular. I froze for a moment, stunned, not fully dressed, heart racing, but instinct kicked in. I grabbed my phone and quietly started recording. "You can't just enter without permission," I said firmly, trying to keep my tone calm. But Karen ignored me, stepping further inside, making herself at home in my own space. She prattled on about supposed infractions, the paint color on my shutters, the spacing of my garden beds, the angle of my mailbox. Nonsensical complaints wrapped in her self-important attitude. I let her talk a moment longer, silently assessing. Then she moved toward my bedroom, peering around corners, muttering about unpermitted decorations. It clicked. I was done playing nice. I stepped forward, now fully visible, uniform partially visible beneath my casual shirt, badge subtly clipped to my belt. Karen froze mid-step. Her confident posture faltered. She had no idea I wasn't just another homeowner. "I'm a police officer," I said evenly, letting my voice carry authority without yelling. Her eyes widened like she'd just seen a ghost. "Wait, you're a cop?" she stammered, clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. "Yes," I replied, standing firm, phone still recording. "And you just committed trespassing." Her lips quivered, mouth opening, words failing to form. She tried to salvage authority, insisting she was just enforcing HOA rules, but the look of panic in her eyes betrayed her. By the time I escorted her to the front door, neighbors had gathered outside, drawn by the commotion. Some filmed, others whispered nervously. I calmly reminded her she could not enter anyone's property without consent, that HOA rules did not grant law enforcement powers, and that her actions were illegal. As she fumbled for an explanation, I called for backup to ensure the situation didn't escalate further. Karen's arrogance crumbled in real time, and the seeds of accountability were already being planted. What happened next would shock everyone in the neighborhood, and would eventually end with her in handcuffs, completely exposed. The next morning the neighborhood was buzzing. Word had spread fast, Karen had crossed the line, and everyone wanted to see how far it would go. I stayed calm, documenting everything meticulously. My phone and camera were ready, every interaction recorded, every word accounted for. I knew her arrogance would push her to escalate. By mid-morning, she showed up at my driveway again, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head, looking as if nothing had happened. Her stride was aggressive, confident, like a cat who had no idea it was about to get swatted. I met her at the gate, phone in hand, recording. "Good morning," I said evenly. "I assume you're aware you can't enter my property without permission?" She scoffed, waving her papers. "I'm just here to ensure compliance. It's my duty as part of the HOA board." Her voice was sharp, dripping with self-importance. "And if you refuse, there will be consequences. Fines, legal action, perhaps even liens." I stayed composed. "I understand HOA rules, but they don't override the law. Trespassing is illegal. Do you want me to remind you what that entails?" Her confident mask faltered slightly, but she quickly covered it. "You're exaggerating. Everyone knows the HOA can inspect homes. Not without notice and consent," I replied calmly. "You were in my home yesterday without permission. That's trespassing, and I have it all recorded." I held my phone up subtly, letting her see the time-stamped video. Her face turned pale. You recorded me?" she stammered. "Yes," I said firmly, "and it's admissible evidence. If this escalates, it will be used." She tried to argue further, citing bylaws and vague authority, but her words became increasingly desperate. Neighbors peeked from their windows and lawns, witnessing her unraveling in public. Some whispered to each other, others shook their heads, disbelief evident. I suggested she leave immediately and communicate via email if she had any legitimate HOA concerns. She hesitated, glaring, then stormed off, muttering under her breath. I documented everything, photos of her car, footage of her walking away, screenshots of her messages. Preparation was key. Knowing her patterns, I anticipated retaliation, sudden inspections, bogus letters, even attempts to involve other neighbors against me. That evening, an official letter arrived via certified mail. It claimed I was in violation of HOA regulations, demanded immediate compliance, and threatened escalating fines. It was thinly veiled intimidation, predictable yet audacious. I reviewed the letter carefully with my attorney, noting every misrepresentation and overreach. Karen had officially escalated her antics, but her ignorance of the law and my position as a police officer would soon work in my favor. The stage was set for confrontation, but this time I would control it. Documentation, calm, and preparation were my tools. Karen had no idea she was about to walk into a trap of her own making. 2 days later, Karen tried a more aggressive tactic. She showed up at my front door just as I was leaving for work, clipboard in hand, ready to confront me again. This time, she was louder, more dramatic, like an actor overplaying her role. But I wasn't going to let her theatrics intimidate me. I stayed calm, keeping my badge visible under my shirt, my phone ready, recording everything. "Good morning," I said evenly as I opened the door. "Do you have permission to be here?" She flailed, pointing at the sidewalk. "I'm here on official HOA business. You cannot ignore the rules. I need to inspect. Without notice or consent, that is trespassing," I replied, voice firm. "Step back or I will have to take legal action." Her eyes widened, and for a split second, panic flickered. But then she recovered, insisting she was doing nothing wrong, that she was only protecting the community. Her tone was dripping with superiority, as if she had the power to bend the law with a glare. I calmly stepped outside, phone recording in one hand, badge subtly visible, and gestured for her to leave the property. She hesitated, clearly trying to assess if I would actually enforce the law. Neighbors began to notice the commotion. Some peeked through windows. Others stood on their lawns, recording on their phones. Karen's presence had become a spectacle, and her confidence started to crumble. Under the scrutiny of the neighborhood audience, seeing no immediate compliance, I decided it was time to escalate. I called for backup. Fellow officers were en route to handle the situation professionally and safely. Karen's lips trembled as she realized she had no leverage, no authority beyond her self-assigned HOA title, and a police officer was about to enforce the law. Within minutes, my colleagues arrived, and the dynamic shifted entirely. Karen attempted to justify her presence, citing bylaws and vague authority, but each explanation was met with factual corrections and calm professionalism. She sputtered, flustered, and the realization hit. Her actions were legally indefensible. The officers advised her to leave immediately and warned her of trespassing charges if she remained on the property. Karen reluctantly gathered her clipboard and stormed off, muttering threats under her breath. Later, I reviewed the recordings. Every gesture, every overreaction, every false claim was documented. The evidence was airtight. Karen had fully exposed her disregard for both the law and basic boundaries. That evening, my attorney filed a formal complaint, citing trespassing, harassment, and intimidation. The HOA board was notified. Karen had officially crossed a line she couldn't recover from. This was no longer just a confrontation. It was the beginning of legal accountability. Karen's arrogance was about to collide with consequences she had never anticipated, and I was ready to see it unfold. The next week, the tension escalated to a breaking point. Karen didn't stop at doorstep confrontations. She began sending official-looking letters, threatening fines, citations, and even legal action. Each envelope was stamped HOA official and addressed to me personally, but her claims were absurd, based on rules that didn't exist or misapplied interpretations. She clearly thought intimidation could force compliance. I read each letter carefully, documenting everything. My attorney advised staying calm, not responding directly, and letting her missteps build the case. Meanwhile, neighbors started sharing stories of her past behavior: surprise inspections, arbitrary fines, and harassing homeowners who questioned her authority. Patterns were forming. Karen's arrogance and entitlement weren't isolated incidents. This was her standard operating procedure. One afternoon, she tried an aggressive maneuver. She showed up at my property again, clipboard raised, flustered by previous confrontations. This time, she wasn't subtle. She walked onto my porch before I could open the door. I calmly stepped out, phone recording in hand, and addressed her firmly. "Step off the property now. You do not have authority to enter without consent." Her eyes darted, her confident facade beginning to crumble. She sputtered something about bylaws and inspections, but the words were hollow and nervous. Neighbors had gathered by now, drawn by her shouting. Phones appeared, cameras pointed. Her audience was no longer passive. They were witnesses. I reminded her again, this time explicitly. "I am a police officer. Entering someone's home without permission is trespassing. If you remain, you will be arrested." The color drained from her face. For the first time, I saw genuine panic. Her usual bravado, the entitlement that fueled her, evaporated in seconds. She tried one last attempt at authority, waving her papers, claiming the board supported her. I calmly responded, "Board decisions do not grant you the right to break the law. Leave now, or I will take immediate action." Karen hesitated, then slowly backed toward the street. I remained calm, recording her every movement. Neighbors whispered and exchanged glances. Finally, they were seeing the HOA's enforcer exposed for what she truly was. A bully who underestimated the wrong person. Within minutes, backup arrived. Officers approached, confirming Karen's trespassing. They calmly advised her that her actions were illegal and warned her of arrest if she didn't comply. For the first time, she truly understood the consequences she had triggered. By the time she was escorted off the property, her fury had turned into stunned disbelief. The neighbors whispered excitedly. Finally, justice had a visible, tangible presence. She had been exposed, humiliated, and her arrogance would soon meet accountability in the courts. That night, I reviewed the footage and letters with my attorney. Every misstep, every intimidation tactic, was documented and ready for formal action. Karen's behavior had provided a perfect, airtight case. The stage was set for the final showdown, one that would not only end with her arrested but would also send a clear message. Entitlement has limits, especially when the law is on your side. The day of reckoning arrived quietly, almost like the calm before a storm. Karen showed up again, apparently confident, but this time there was tension in her walk. She was unaware that the evidence I had gathered, recordings, letters, witness statements, was already in the hands of my colleagues and my attorney. Her bluffing and threats had caught up with her, and there was no way out. I was prepared. I had notified local law enforcement in advance, and a team was stationed nearby to ensure the situation remained safe and professional. As she approached the front door, I stepped out calmly, phone recording, badge subtly visible under my shirt. Karen froze for a fraction of a second, realizing that the person she had repeatedly harassed was not only armed with legal authority, but was a trained officer. "I've warned you multiple times," I said, voice steady. "Entering this property without consent is a criminal offense. Step back, or you will be placed under arrest." Her face turned pale. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but no words came. She glanced around nervously and realized the neighbors had gathered. All eyes on her, cameras pointed. Her usual confidence evaporated instantly. Backup officers moved in. Karen tried to argue, waving her clipboard, insisting she was just enforcing HOA rules. But her attempts fell flat. Every statement she made contradicted the law, and the officers made it clear. Trespassing is illegal. HOA rules do not grant police powers, and she would be arrested if she didn't comply immediately. With no room to maneuver, Karen reluctantly allowed herself to be escorted to the police vehicle. Her lips trembled, her entitlement gone, replaced by fear and disbelief. Neighbors whispered and recorded silently, some smirking, others shaking their heads at the drama finally reaching its conclusion. I remained calm, documenting everything, making sure that the evidence of her arrogance and illegal actions was complete. As the officers drove off, Karen was officially placed under arrest for trespassing and harassment. The HOA board quickly distanced themselves, realizing the legal consequences she had triggered on their behalf. Later, the HOA issued an official apology to the community. Neighbors who had been intimidated by Karen in the past thanked me for standing firm. The pool of fear she had created dissolved, replaced by relief and quiet laughter at the absurdity of her arrogance. That day taught an important lesson. Confidence backed by authority and preparation beats entitlement every time. Karen's meltdown and arrest became the talk of the neighborhood, a cautionary tale for anyone who believes rules are above the law. The house returned to peace. The yard, once a stage for intimidation, now hosted laughter, children, and casual neighborly visits. Karen's era of chaos was over, and accountability had prevailed. Justice wasn't loud, flashy, or vindictive. It was thorough, undeniable, and inevitable. And in the end, it made the community safer and stronger, one trespassing Karen at a time.